Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Neurodiversity Gold podcast with me, Jude Morrow. And first of all, the plugs at the top of the episode. We're still seeking executive producers for the Neurodiversity Gold podcast, and you can sign up and work with us at patreon.com/neurodiversity gold podcast. Within that, you'll get a say on the guests that come on the show, the direction, making decisions, working with us to get the podcast in front of as much ND people as we possibly can, and allies and everything else. And with the episodes of the Neurodiversity Gold podcast, you can get them on our snazzy podcast website, which is neurodiversitygoldpodcast.com. So my guests today, one of the power couples of the MD stratosphere. Basically what they've done is they've worked in their marriage to leverage like differences, neuro differences and skill sets to complete each other through their weaknesses and celebrate each other's strengths, and hope to help other MD couples and families to do the same. They are the founders and operators of Christian Neurodiverse Marriage, which is at christianneurodiversemarriage.com. And my guests for today are Dan and Stephanie Holmes. Welcome back.
Good to be back.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
Because whenever you booked on, it's like I couldn't wait, and I'm going to kind of continue on some of the chat from the part before I hit the record button, which was on the last podcast episode. Whether it was this podcast or your own podcast, we had a very, very deep discussion, Dan, you and I, about ancient Egyptian algebra.
I was just an
But
observer. I was just there.
yeah, where it was a very forthright kind of conversation about obscure topics, because whenever it comes to special interests and diving into uh, what people would view to be obscure topics, can be a joy, certainly to us and to me. And I'm quite surprised that even after all this time, Dan, you've still kind of kept your eye on this ancient Egyptian algebra, which is a thing.
It is a thing. It's surprisingly interesting topic. And I spend too much time on it. I probably do spend more time reading about Egyptian algebra and other obscure things. Like recently I've learned, and I want to learn more about, the use of whale vomit in perfume.
Oh, okay, right. This is a juicy one, and we've possibly got the podcast title for this episode, which is um, Neurodiversity Whale Vomit with Dan and Stephanie Holmes. So, I mean, Dan, you do know you can't just leave it there. You can't just say I'm very interested in the use of whale vomit in perfume. So,
So, yeah, so I'll tell you the origin of this, and I'm on the very early stages of learning more about it. I was in every, a handful of Fridays as a team in the office, we'll do a quiz, and it'll be like a competition. And one of these was a quiz, truth or false. You had to guess, was this fact a truth or a lie? And it turns out that in some point in history, a lady found whale vomit. I don't know how you do this because it feels like it should be, dispersed in the ocean. But she collected enough whale vomit and sold it for 60 grand US because you can use it in perfume. And so a little bit of research turns out that there is a lot of other things that go into perfume, like animal musk and other things you don't really know how to capture. How do you capture whale vomit? How do you capture animal musk? How did anybody know that you could put that in a perfume and people would buy it? Those are still outstanding questions that I need to know more about.
and obviously the same with the kind of ancient Egyptian algebra topic, where I've been thinking, this is actually quite interesting. Where I actually got it up on Google just while you were talking. Ambergris or ambergris. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but this is crazy. Where it's ambergris has been highly valued by perfume makers as a fixative that allows the scent to endure much longer, although it has been mostly replaced by synthetic ambroxide. Where I looked at a bottle just now of perfume that does contain whale vomit, and you can buy it online. It's called Caron D'Arme perfume, and it will set you back a very neat £17,342 sterling, which in American is $19,900 for a bottle of perfume. Like,
That's a
I
need
mean,
for
Dan,
well vomit. That's a need I don't have.
That's a scent not many people have.
So, Stephanie, how would you feel if Dad had purchased you a bottle of whale vomit perfume for
Well,
Christmas? I mean, it's coming up.
thankfully, I have allergies, so he knows not to buy me anything with the scent. But even interesting, I guess, to a neurodiverse relationship is how Dan broaches that with me. Like, I don't know if it was over dinner or something like, did you know that perfume has well vomit? I was like, that's out of the blue. Where did that come from? But that's sometimes how conversations get started at our table.
Like, I mean, how would you know if you're allergic to whale vomit?
Well, I'm allergic to all scents, all perfumes. So I can't wear any perfume. So I don't have to worry about getting one with well vomit because hopefully I won't get one at all.
But you never know. This could be the only perfume that you're not allergic to, and
There
that would
is
be a
it.
very expensive kind of habit, Dan, to keep up. You know, to have
Expensive.
to keep replacing them, these bottles of whale vomit perfumes. That is fascinating. And you know what? See, for the next time we talk, I'll probably have learned more about it. We'll be in a better position. And you sort of touched on it, you know, the kind of the discussing things together, with your marriage. You're very much like husband and wife kind of team. And I just suppose for the benefit of anybody listening, I mean, with ND kind of marriages, I mean, what kind of work do you do in that sphere?
So our particular approach, we have like a counsel slash coaching approach. So sometimes where I usually meet a couple initially and kind of what's going on and what are the challenges. And then sometimes I think I learned about the article through Evelyn Welton. She had talked about neurodiverse communication to neurodiverse and NT to NT. And so sometimes Dan coaches, specifically if there's a man on the spectrum. And then we kind of take the therapy goals and then he can help coach and hold accountable and what's your barriers and how is that working for you kind of a thing. So that sometimes we meet with a couple together so that neither party feels like the other one is like the project, so to speak. So we just kind of change it up depending on what that couple is needing. And then sometimes the person who's identified on the spectrum is still at a place they're not fully welcoming the identification. So we have to kind of work through that phase first because you really can't move forward if someone feels attacked, accused, or not identifying with something that's a part of them and how they communicate with people. So that's kind of the basics. And then our little niche is we also are a couple of faith. And so every faith has different faith rules. And so how does that work in Christianity when there's some things that make some different nuances for a neurodiverse couple? Then that's a whole different ballgame.
And whenever we were getting like the compiling the guests for this season, where this is what I found is that you're getting the same themes all the time. Like you're getting things like late diagnoses, accommodations in the workplace, where it's an easy assumption for a lot of us, and I suppose it was me included at a point, I will admit, to say that, the kind of main religious belief or kind of religious sentiment in the ND community is mostly non-belief. But what we found with some of the guests kind of coming through is that that certainly isn't the case. And I know we discussed it before, where there seems to be some form of underservice, for neurodivergent people who have a Christian faith. And I mean, is that something that you found as well? Is that there's more than what you possibly imagined that there would be? Or were
Yeah.
you kind of aware that there
Yeah.
was plenty anyway?
Because in some religious and Christian cultures, there's still kind of a superstitious ancient belief that if someone has a diagnosis or a label, somebody sinned or they're under a curse or something their family did brought the family under a curse. So it's
Mm.
still, even in our century that we're in now, there's a lot of stigma to being anything depressed, anxious, on the spectrum. So that can be like a different issue. So harder to bring that up and talk about it because that means, quote, something's wrong with you, or it could implicate a spiritual issue with you. And then sometimes Christian providers, well-meaning, whether they're chaplains or counselors or clinicians, bring that in too, that being on the spectrum is, a disease, that kind of medical model or spiritual model. We need to like pray it out of you or, cure it from you. We're going to treat the autism versus treat the marriage. So it's very difficult to find. Usually I am counselor 5, 6, 7 by the time someone has come to me, and they've usually had a lot of damage. And usually the helper has not been helpful. They've actually caused harm.
Yeah, and it's sad to hear that because I mean, similar to what kind of we do here, as far as like business coaching and development and stuff like that, people always say, I've been to 3 or 4 beforehand, or however many more beforehand. So it always does make people hesitant. You're quite right, and we did talk about this before, where and your take on it is one that I've loved because a lot of people ask, what is a life coach? And I have quoted you before and what your definition of a life coach is. Like I mean, it's there in your site, but I'd love to kind of have it, from you for the benefit of the listeners, because it's a term that's thrown around everywhere now. Where COVID came, everybody decided to be a life coach. So I suppose, kind of from your perspective, what is a life coach?
I I like the analogy of a sports team. Just you think whatever your favorite team is, sport is. Mine is baseball, and it is from a position coach or any other coach that runs on the team. It is the person that helps the player, sticking with the analogy, get the best out of themselves. And that, fundamentally, that's what you're here for, is a little bit of a mirror, a little bit of a mentor, and a whole lot of questions. What isn't working? What is working? How do you get from here to there? Right? That person knows their situation better than I ever could. And it's drawing out what is real, what is just below the surface, what's unaware, where are the blind spots, and helping that person find their own way, not prescribing a way for them. Just as much as if you're playing shortstop and you're having trouble with ground ball or whatever, or maybe your hitting isn't working. It's that one coach that is constantly helping you. We'll try this. Maybe this could work. Well, how does that feel? What's that? Right? It's that help that gets the best out of the person that you're talking with.
Yeah. And and it is a brilliant analogy. And one thing that you said to me before, which has really, really stuck with me, is, what a good kind of coach or life coach should do in any discipline, whether it's sport or whether it's life coaching or relationship or marriage or whatever. It's helping people to see things from another perspective.
Yes.
Where I know the Rain Group, they do a lot of work with like consulting firms, and they take a lot of like customer data, and they compiled a list. It was a couple of years ago. I'm sure it's easily found online. At one stage I did have it, but I think it went out with the old laptop. But they asked like decision makers, what has made you kind of buy this or get into this service or use it or anything. And the number one answer is that they were helped to see things from another perspective. Because it's hard to see things from another perspective whenever you're in it. Like even whenever it comes to marketing, right? We don't market ourselves. We market people, but we don't market ourselves because let's say, you and I both have babies, where I would say my baby's more beautiful than yours, and you would say your baby's more beautiful than mine. Where you can't look at your own thing objectively. And I've kind of come to the belief that you kind of can't really look at your own circumstances objectively either, where sometimes you can think, oh, things aren't going well, but then with another voice and another perspective, someone could say, you know what, things are going much better than you think. And
Right.
that's what really works. So, I mean, I suppose with the kind of the work that you're doing, with ND Christian couples, I mean, what does it look like working with you? What journey do people typically go on?
So it kind of depends on where the couple is when they're starting. So I have recently decided I can't handle the stress if someone's coming in really defensive and angry about a recent diagnosis or identification. I would say, you know what, you have some interpersonal work you need to do first. You need to kind of figure out what this means to you, because you can't really be on the journey of us if you're still on the journey of you. And so I really think a starting point is that, and I would say both people need to be at that acceptance. So sometimes the neurotypical spouse or partner, like while they'll say, yes, my partner's on the spectrum, they're neurodiverse, they still expect completely neurotypical behaviors. So if you're going that I always say that's not the standard. We're not going towards how to make this person who's neurodiverse think and become neurotypical. That's that's not realistic. That's just me coaching him or her to mask, and that's not what we want. So how does this person communicate differently, and how do you communicate differently? I almost taught like a third language or the third space of third words, because we've got to figure that out. So I've kind of stopped taking a couple on if both people aren't in the space that we're not curing or someone's angry. So if they're in that space of acceptance and kind of ready to do the work, we use our podcast as a means of some of the therapeutic work that we do, because our wait list now is going into 2024. And so that felt like we needed to do something for those people on the wait list. So we might have, have you on, have Dr. Tony Atwood on, have Dr. Temple on, have other couples on. And so it's giving some kind of hope or some kind of message, or it might talk about a specific topic that's particular to a neurodiverse couple. And then depending on where the couple is, if maybe specifically the guy on the spectrum, if he feels like he needs some additional coaching or he's getting stuck, that's where Dan kind of comes in. And then they've set like 2 or 3 specific goals, and he kind of coaches that person through. And I'm kind of keeping track of the treatment plan and where are we going, and what's this overall goal that we're working on. So Dan has this analogy he uses of, what is it, acro yoga. So he calls what we do acro yoga. So you might have to ask him a little bit about that.
Dan, take it away.
So, I'm not I don't know a whole lot about yoga, but I stumbled on to, I don't know how I found it, but there's this thing called acro yoga, and it's usually done in pairs. And if you just Google the term and actually turn Google images on, you'll get some really good images. And it's usually a guy, it doesn't have to be this way, but it's usually a guy and a lady. And the lady is what they call the flyer, and the guy is usually on his back with his feet up in the air, or maybe he's the foundation. But the lady is doing some kind of expressive artistry, and the idea is it takes both of them to express fully what's going on, and it takes the strength and the foundation of the guy in those pictures to be steady and strong, and the two of them to have reciprocal trust in order to make that, image, that pose successful, right? The elegance, the artistry that comes out in that particular activity is graceful, it's gentle, it's artistic and expressive, but it only works in tandem. And there's an interesting aspect. If you do the little bit of reading, you realize there's 3 folks inside of that activity. One of them is the base, one of them is the flyer, and the other one is the spotter. And to go back to your perspective, it is the spotter that is recognizing the perspective. That's the person that sees what the other 2 can't. So from a coach perspective, the coach can be the spotter. This is what I see. What do you think? How do you think that's working for you? You've got the foundation and the base, and you got the foundation and you got the flyer. Both of them are working their thing, but you got the spotter walking all the way around saying, you know what, I think if you shift to your left or your right or whatever, it works out that you can make that pose even better. And the other half of that analogy is in all forms. It's also true that both persons need to do their individual work, right? Because if the foundation isn't going to the gym and isn't strong enough, it doesn't matter how elegant the flyer is. She's never going to be held up in the air, right? Because there's just not the strength in the foundation to hold her up. So it really is a good picture of I have to do the things that I know I need to do that are strong, that make me stronger, so that when we come together and we practice together, it really does take what I am and us to make this.
And I would add to his analogy that sometimes couples, when they come to counseling or coaching, like you don't have the skill set yet to be doing the fun, fancy stuff. You got to stick with some basics. You got to learn some, just how do you communicate first? How do you communicate and how do you connect? How do you each define connection? Where are the hangups in your communication before you start trying? I mean, I'm sure, you know, in acro yoga, those two partners in that must communicate well or somebody's going to get hurt. And so the same thing in counseling, coaching, that sometimes couples are trying to do things like, well, we want to be able to be here. And that's what's like, well, we don't have the 3 skills necessary to get there yet. So we're going to have to break that down into different skills.
And I've just came up with something that I think you'll like. And I mean, I think you should definitely pursue it, where you're great at analogies. So what if you were to write a book called Danalogies, like of all of your wisdom, into a book? Like, how good is that?
To remember them. That's the thing. Sometimes they'll come up with something really great, and then the next day it's gone.
Yeah. Do you know what to do? Like, get like a notepad and pen and just label it Danalogies, and just write them all down. And I mean, and publish them. Like this is the world according to Reverend Dan. I mean, how
The word according to Revelation.
like that would absolutely work.
If I didn't remember that until she said it. So you're right. I would have to write them down as I thought of them.
You would and keep it with you at all times. I mean, you can get like pens that go around your neck that little old ladies wear.
Keep
So
a
if
sticky
something,
notepad, keep a pen.
yeah. So if something comes to mind, because you know what, I'm sure there was a analogy somewhere that would have healed and made world peace our existence, but you forgot to write it down.
Right? Yeah.
Like it's possible. Please do that. Please, please, please. And I want to hear about this. Like this would be that would be such a hit.
I've gotten journals. Like I'm trying to help out here, Jude, but like I
Mhm.
forget I have the journal. I forget where the thing is. So we got to work on the executive function piece.
Because I mean, as far as analogies, I mean, even in the Christian faith, I mean, it is full of them. Like look at Jesus's parables. I mean, because that the way the parables were told and as they happened. For those stories, like that's how they've stayed in the mainstream consciousness because they were compressed down, simple to understand, and had a moral message at the end. Now, I'm not saying write some parables, but I mean, even if you had your analogies, like it's brandable. Like I see merch.
There's like Danalogies, Danables for Dan's
Yeah,
parables. I mean, there it can go.
yeah. So what
Well,
I
we
would
are
do this,
actually thinking of writing a book next year. So maybe that's a little appendix there in the back or something that Dan's analogies.
the analogies, yeah. And by the way, just for anybody that thinks they're clever, right? By the time this episode goes out, in a few weeks' time, probably mid-November, mid to late November, where that term will already be trademarked. And by that time, just in case somebody's listening, thanks, holy crap, that's a really great idea. I'm gonna go and call my lawyer on WhatsApp speed dial. Um, so I would register that pretty quickly, if I were you. But a question I wanted to kind of direct at you, Stephanie, was there's a term that we've discussed before and it appears on your website, and it's a lovely sounding term, but I think you'll be able to describe it and flesh it out a lot more than what I think it is. And it's the term spiritual renewal. So what is that?
Um, Usually in couples, especially when there's been a late life diagnosis and the couple is a couple of faith. Um, Usually you kind of were told in the kind of the Christian faith, if you kind of live a good life and kind of follow the rules and follow the word and you wait for that person that God's brought into your life, things are going to go well in marriage, just kind of happily ever after. But when you kind of been living together and things aren't going well, there's a part of the system that no one's known about, the spectrum piece. People feel kind of soul crushed, for each other. Each person doesn't understand the other person. Each person might even feel kind of traumatized in the relationship. And, you can't even have a simple conversation of like, where's the phone charger without it turning into disruption. And especially for a Christian couple, since so much is about, your faith and your relationship with God, which is spiritual, you can kind of bring things into doubt. Like, why did God bring this person to me? Why did God put us together? And so that can cause like, not just questions in our relationship, but questions in about me, about my faith, about so if you we think of ourselves as, we're spiritual, our flesh, our physical, our body, and then also your soul and mind, your personality, and your emotions are all in there. And so all of those can tend to be affected when your relationship is in trauma or crisis. And so all parts of you need to be renewed and healed if you're going to be two whole people working together to have a whole marriage and a healthy system.
I like that, and it sort of kind of echoes your point, Dan, from earlier. It's or I suppose what you kind of both alluded to it was, I mean, there needs to be some form of healing of individual self before kind of the team can really work. And I mean, as always, but I mean, with this episode could last 5 hours. I would say, Dan, there'll probably be a time where we have like a Denalogies episode and it's just streamed live and it's 5 hours and people will just come in and out and the time will fly. Um, but I just wanted to kind of put as my final question to you is how can people get in touch with you and work with you?
All right, I always forget our website name. What's our website? While he's doing that and looking it up, so we say it right, because sometimes I don't know if it's plural or singular at the end. May I mention that we are going to be embarking in 2023 on some actually academic research on neurodiverse couples. And it will be a phenomenological study, which means in the academic sense, sometimes clinicians or professionals talk about a person or a culture or a people. In qualitative phenomenological study, it's of the words of the person. So instead of us interpreting what a neurodiverse person is saying or whatever, it's what did the person say themselves. And so we're going to be studying different types of couples. So people of faith, people not of faith. If you're double neurodiverse, the woman's on the spectrum, the man's on the spectrum, all of that. And so at some point, we'll be sending a link out, just kind of asking anybody in the world who would like to be a part of the study. And we want to really help clinicians understand why not having better understanding of diagnosis is detrimental to the person and to the couple, and see like what's going on too. Are people of faith doing better? Are people without faith doing better? What are the things within faith that are maybe making it more difficult? What are the nuances if the woman's on the spectrum or the man's on the spectrum or you're both on the spectrum? So that's our goal for 2023. And we'll be inviting people all over the world to participate who want to help clinicians better understand.
And you know what? I mean, of course, with us, we'll be more than happy to give you whatever help and support we can on that. Like, I mean, we've big reach and mailing lists, and we have a podcast and everything. But all that's left for me to say is thank you so much again for coming on. And I got your website, and to get in touch with Dan and Stephanie Holmes, it's ChristianNeurodiverseMarriage.com. That's ChristianNeurodiverseMarriage.com. Connect with both on LinkedIn as well. And to you both, it's been wonderful having you back again. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I'll see you again next week for another episode of the Neurodiversity Gold.